I remember the day it ended because the noise was all wrong. I was in my downtown office, the one with the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, and I was on a call with the string quartet for the Vance Thorne wedding. They were concerned about the forecast of rain, so I was walking them through Contingency Plan C, which involved pre-positioned awnings and a slightly altered musical selection. Then came the first siren, then another, and soon the air was full of a sound I had never heard before, a chorus of every emergency vehicle in the city screaming at once. It was a failure of the system, a sound that should not exist because it meant every emergency was happening at the same time. The cell network went down mid-sentence, and I stood there looking at the gridlocked streets below. People were getting out of their cars, which was an unplanned variable I could not account for. The first screams were distant, then they grew closer, and they were not the sound of pain but the sound of pure animal panic. I locked my office door and pulled the blinds, and I watched my perfect color-coded schedule for the day become completely and utterly irrelevant. The world did not fall apart, it just stopped following the plan. That was what cost me everything. My business, my identity, my belief that chaos was something you could defeat with a binder and a timeline. Now my world is just this house, and the binder for the Vance Thorne wedding sits on a shelf above my desk, a perfectly aligned monument to a life that no longer exists. I spend most of my days the same way, inventorying the canned goods and cataloging the expiration dates on a spreadsheet I keep on a solar-powered laptop. The process is calming because it is a problem with a clear solution. Today I noted that I have precisely 4 months of filtered water left if I maintain my current rate of consumption. This is a variable I can control. My home is a fortress of suburban brick with reinforced doors and blacked-out windows, and outside the silence is usually absolute, broken only by the wind or the distant, scraping shriek of the dead. Today a new sound cut through it, a clean and consistent sound of a well-maintained engine. It was an impossible noise, and it was getting closer. I remember a planning session at the Riverview Ballroom a few weeks before the world stopped. A custom 7-tier cake had collapsed in the heat, and a burst pipe in the main kitchen was flooding the prep area with an inch of greasy water. Chloe Vance was there, and she saw the ruined cake and began a tirade about perfection and betrayal that was loud enough to be heard over the frantic shouts of the catering staff. I felt nothing. I simply opened my event binder to the tab labeled Contingency, Floral and Catering, and placed my finger on a line. I looked at my assistant and told her to enact Protocol 7B, which would have a new, slightly smaller cake delivered from our backup bakery within the hour, and reroute all plating to the auxiliary kitchen on the second floor. Chloe's mother was beside me, wringing her hands and looking at the water spreading across the marble floor. I told her, "Plan for the worst, and you'll never be surprised." Now, I stood by my reinforced door, peering through the peephole at an armored black car parked on my dead lawn, and I felt the cold surprise of a woman who had failed to plan for this. My supplies are organized, but they are also finite. Every night I listen to the shortwave radio, turning the dial through oceans of static to find fragments of voices. I hear stories of raiders on the highways and fortified towns that shoot strangers on sight. There is no government, no help, only people with less than me who want what I have. This reality is a constant threat to my control, and it drives me to stare at the glossy brochure on my desk. The Havenwood Reserve. It is an underground, self-sustaining community built in an old missile silo. The brochure shows schematics of hydroponic farms, geothermal power, and residential pods that look clean and orderly. It is not just a refuge. It is the ultimate controlled environment, a place where the variables are finally and permanently managed. I was so close to having the money for it before the collapse. Now it is just a dream. The radio crackled to life 2 nights ago, a clear voice for almost a minute. "They are not a rescue team," the voice said. I repeat, Eden's Gate is not. Then the signal dissolved back into noise. A man in pristine black tactical gear got out of the armored car. He moved with a calm purpose that was deeply unsettling, and he walked directly to my front door. He did not knock. He just stood there, waiting to be acknowledged. I spoke through the door, my voice flat and steady. "I don't have anything for you." "My name is not important," he said, his own voice muffled by the steel. "I have a message for Meredith Finch from Julian Thorne." The name sent a jolt through me. Julian Thorne, the groom, the client. He was supposed to be in the mountains, out of reach. Julian Thorne is dead. He is very much alive, and he was a silent partner in the Havenwood development. He has a list of personnel they considered essential. Your name was at the top. My obsession with security, my entire life's motivation, was being offered to me through a locked door. It was either a perfect lie or a perfect opportunity. I made a calculation. Leave the message. It's not that kind of message. Julian offers a trade. You have antibiotics, amoxicillin. We have a way to communicate. He knew my inventory. I felt a cold violation. I thought about the risk, but the name Havenwood was too powerful. "A parley," I said. "You open your pack and show me the phone. I will open the mail slot and show you the medicine." He did it without hesitation. Through the slot I could see a sealed box of military-grade antibiotics in his hand, and he could see the burner phone in mine. We made the exchange. As he reached down to pick up the medicine, I slid through the slot. His hand brushed against the undercarriage of my SUV parked in the garage, the door of which was just a few feet away. He left a small, magnetic tracker stuck to the frame. I saw nothing. I just secured my door and watched him drive away, his clean engine fading into the unnatural silence. The phone contained a single encrypted message. There was a map, a satellite photo of Chloe Vance huddled in the penthouse of her family's downtown skyscraper, and a simple offer. Escort. Chloe 1,500 miles to a compound in the Rockies called Eden's Gate. In return, Julian would grant me a physical keycard and biometric activation for a place in Havenwood. My eyes landed on the final line. Your payment will be the key to Havenwood, but first, you must bring me my bride. I spent the next 24 hours in a state of controlled panic. My mind raced through the variables. The journey was a logistical nightmare through a collapsed country. The shriekers were a known threat, their behavior predictable if you understood their reliance on sound. The living were worse, their desperation a chaotic element I could not model, and the package itself, Chloe Vance, was a liability. I remembered her tantrums, her helplessness, her complete inability to function without a team of people catering to her every demand. I spread maps across my dining room table, calculating fuel consumption against the known locations of abandoned depots. I listed potential threats and cross-referenced them with contingency options. I weighed the extreme, almost certain risk of death against the absolute security of Havenwood. I looked at the spreadsheet showing my dwindling water supply. Then I looked at the brochure of the clean, perfect underground world. A life of quiet attrition in this house was its own kind of failure. I could wait for the chaos to finally breach my walls, or I could navigate it on my own terms one last time. My entire life had been a flight from the unpredictable. Havenwood was the finish line. I picked up the burner phone, my finger hovering over the green icon on the screen. I took one steadying breath and pressed it. I loaded the SUV with the quietest efficiency I possessed. Every piece of gear had its place, every box was labeled. The vehicle's engine was already sound-dampened, an upgrade I had made months ago for scavenging runs. I drove into the silent, skeletal remains of the city. My itinerary for the extraction was timed to the second. At EO 4007, I used a remote trigger to set off the alarm of a wrecked sedan on 5th Avenue. 2 minutes later, I triggered another one, 3 blocks north. I created a breadcrumb trail of noise, a carefully planned sonic event that drew every shrieker in a 10-block radius away from Chloe's luxury high-rise. I broke into the service entrance and took the stairs 48 floors to the penthouse. I found her in a walk-in closet the size of my first apartment, surrounded by the finest luggage in the world. She was pale and thin, wearing a designer sweatsuit that was impossibly white. She looked up at me, her eyes wide with a mixture of terror and relief. The journey was beginning. The plan was in motion. Chloe looked at the collection of packed bags, then back at me, her expression one of genuine, naive confusion. "Which of these do you think will be best for the wedding photos?" The smell was the first variable I hadn't properly accounted for. a sweet and heavy odor of rot that the car's air filtration system couldn't scrub away. We drove past a field where a dead horse lay on its side, and 3 shriekers were bent over it, their movements jerky and unnatural. Chloe made a small sound in the passenger seat, a choked gasp that was dangerously loud in the quiet cab of the SUV. I glanced at her, ready to give the signal for silence, but it was too late. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with a horror that was not abstract anymore, and a full-throated scream tore out of her. The sound was a physical thing, a shockwave that went out into the dead world. Instantly, the heads of the 3 shriekers at the horse carcass snapped up. Then another from behind a rusted tractor, and 2 more from the skeletal remains of a farmhouse. They started moving toward us, a lurching, stumbling run that was horrifyingly fast. I slammed my foot on the accelerator and wrenched the wheel to the right, leaving the pavement for a cracked and overgrown access road that ran parallel to a line of suburban houses. The SUV bucked over the broken ground, and Chloe kept screaming, the noise a continuous beacon for the things chasing us. I weaved through abandoned cars, using them as obstacles, knowing the shriekers followed sound in a straight line and were easily confused by physical barriers. I cut the engine behind a large brick house with an overgrown hedge, and we coasted into silence. The creatures ran past on the road, their shrieks fading as they followed the echo of her panic down the street. I waited until the last footstep was gone, then I put the car in park and turned to face her. She was sobbing now, her hands over her face. Unplanned noise is a death sentence. My voice was flat and even, with all the emotion stripped out of it. You will follow my rules, or this contract is void, and I will leave you in the next functioning vehicle I find. Chloe lowered her hands, her face a mess of tears and dirt. She stared at the windshield, which had a fine spray of dark liquid on it from our passage. She nodded slowly, her throat working. I saw the fear in her eyes, the raw terror of a person who had finally understood the stakes. But there was something else there too, a flicker of cold, calculating assessment as she looked at me. It was a look I recognized, the look of someone recalculating their own plan. We learned a valuable lesson a few days later when I dropped a metal canteen while refilling it from a stream. The sharp clang brought 3 shriekers out of the woods in under a minute, and we barely made it back to the car. But the low drone of the engine, even when we were idling, never seemed to attract them at all. It was the sharp, percussive sounds they hunted. This became a new rule, a new variable to control. It was this rule that saved us when we found the highway blocked by a jackknifed fuel tanker under an overpass. A camp was set up around it, with crude armored cars and the glint of rifle barrels in the shadows. Road rats, controlling the fuel. My itinerary said to go around, but that would cost us 2 days we didn't have. I pulled off the road, hidden behind a line of dead trees. I handed Chloe the flare gun from the emergency kit and showed her the digital watch on my wrist. When the timer hits 0, you will fire this into the air. Not before, not after. Exactly on 0. She took the heavy pistol, her expression serious. I left her there and circled around on foot to the other side of the encampment, staying low. I found a loose piece of sheet metal leaning against a concrete support. I waited, watching the timer on my own watch count down. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I kicked the sheet metal. The sharp bang echoed under the overpass, and the road rats all turned in my direction, shouting and raising their weapons. A moment later, a loud pop sounded from the opposite side, where I had left Chloe. A red flare bloomed in the sky, and then the shriekers came. They poured from the fields and woods, drawn to the sharp report of the flare gun, and fell upon the road rats' camp. We drove through the chaos, the sounds of gunfire and screaming swallowed by the guttural shrieks of the infected. Once we were clear, Chloe lowered the still smoking flare gun. Her hands were shaking, but it was not from fear. A strange, genuine smile played on her lips. "What's next?" she asked. What was next was a critical lack of water. My itinerary had a location marked, a fortified settlement from old FEMA relief maps called the Bridgefall Community. We saw the walls from a mile away, a barricade of scrap metal and rusted cars encircling a small cluster of houses near a collapsed interstate bridge. As we approached, a colored flag was raised from a watchtower. Green. It meant approach slowly. I stopped the car 100 yards out and got out with my hands visible. A man appeared on the wall holding a rifle. He raised a red flag. The meaning was clear on the laminated card I had found in a military convoy: leave or die. Chloe got out of the car, ignoring my hiss to get back inside. "My name is Chloe Vance," she shouted, her voice carrying in the stillness. "My father is—" The man on the wall said nothing. He just leveled his rifle until the barrel was pointing directly at her head. He did not waver. I grabbed Chloe's arm and pulled her back into the SUV, forcing her down into the seat. I put the vehicle in reverse and backed away slowly until we were out of sight. I didn't need a flag to understand that there was no help for us there. They were taking care of their own, and we were not their own. Later that night, parked in a hidden ravine, I checked the vehicle's water purification system. The warning light was blinking. 2 days of potable water left, maximum. The map showed 500 miles of empty space before the next possibility of a settlement. We reached the Crimson River Bridge a day later, and my entire plan fell apart. The bridge was a mangled skeleton of twisted steel, its center completely collapsed into the wide, muddy river below. It was a dead end. My master plan, my meticulous, color-coded itinerary of routes and contingencies had failed. As if on cue, the sky broke open. A thunderstorm rolled in, the rumble of thunder a constant rolling noise that blanketed the landscape. The sound masked everything: our engine, our footsteps, and the approach of 1,000 other things. They were converging on the valley, a massive horde drawn from miles around by the storm. I froze. My mind, which was built to process data and create logical steps, had nothing to work with. There was no contingency for this. The plan was worthless. As the first wave of shriekers appeared on the ridge, I was paralyzed. It was Chloe who moved. She pointed toward a small group of armed scavengers who were also trapped near the riverbank, their truck stuck in the mud. Then she did the last thing I would have ever planned. She ran out into the open, away from our vehicle, and started screaming. She feigned a fall, crying for help, the perfect damsel in distress. The scavengers saw her, an easy mark. One of them raised his rifle and fired a shot into the air, a show of force. That single sharp gunshot was a dinner bell. It cut through the rumbling thunder and drew the attention of the entire horde. They swarmed the scavenger's position in a wave of unnatural motion. Chloe grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong, and pulled me toward a barely visible service road I hadn't even seen, half swallowed by weeds. "The plan is over," she said, her voice firm and clear over the storm. "Time for a new one." We were navigating the treacherous backroads when the tire went flat. It was a slow leak, but by the time I found a place to pull over, the rim was almost on the ground. As I was wrestling with the jack, the shortwave radio I kept on for any stray signal crackled. It was not the usual static or broken cries for help. It was a clean, uncorrupted signal. "Ms. Finch." The voice was calm and professional. "Your deviation from the primary route has been noted. Stay put. Assistance is 5 minutes out." Before I could process it, an armored black truck appeared, driving smoothly down the ruined road. Men in matching black tactical gear got out. They moved with a discipline I hadn't seen since the world fell. They were Julian's apostles. They didn't ask questions. They took my rifle and the pistol from the glove box, their movements efficient and silent. They insisted on driving our SUV after changing the tire with practiced speed. We lost all autonomy, becoming passengers in our own journey. As we drove, I watched the lead apostle in the rearview mirror. He was speaking quietly into his radio. His words were faint, but I made them out. "The asset is secure. Tell Thorne the delivery is back on schedule." Eden's Gate was a lie. It was a pristine green golf resort surrounded by a high concrete wall. The lawns were perfect. The flowers were in bloom. Julian Thorne greeted us at the main entrance, his smile as bright and welcoming as the world outside was dark. He led us into his office, a large room with expensive furniture and a view of the mountains. He sent Chloe away with a gentle word, promising she could rest and clean up. When the door closed, his mask dropped. "You and I are the same, Miss Finch," he said, his voice now cold and precise. We see the chaos and crave a system. Your mistake was planning for variables. I plan for assets. He walked to his large mahogany desk. On it was a silver keycard, the logo for the Havenwood Reserve gleaming on its surface. My salvation. He picked it up. Then he pressed a button, and a guard brought Chloe back into the room. Julian took her hand and placed it on a biometric scanner built into the desk. There was a click. He then used her hand to guide the keycard into a slot that had opened. "You were an asset to get her here," he said, looking directly at me. "Chloe is an asset to keep my system running. And assets are controllable." He pulled the card out and slid it back into his pocket. A guard stepped forward and gestured for me to follow. He led me to a luxurious guest room, the kind of place I used to book for my wealthiest clients. The door closed behind me with the heavy, final sound of a lock engaging. It was a perfect, comfortable prison. I was alone, stripped of my weapons, my vehicle, my entire purpose. I realized then that I was never the planner. I was just an item on someone else's itinerary. I sat on the thick carpet, the useless tokens he had given me as payment, scattered around me. My original itinerary, the tattered, dirt-stained pages that had been my Bible, lay beside me. It was a monument to my failure. I had planned for events, for logistics, for terrain. I had never planned for the people. I had treated Chloe like a package and Julian like a client, ignoring the most important variable of all. Through the heavy door, I heard a commotion, a struggle. I peered through the peephole and saw Chloe being dragged down the hallway by two women in the same clean uniforms as the followers below. She was fighting them, her face filled with a genuine terror I hadn't seen since that first day. They were taking her to be prepped for what they were calling the reunion ceremony. My obsession with a secure future had led me directly into a gilded cage and delivered a young woman to a monster. My perfect plan had created a perfect trap. I looked at my tattered itinerary on the floor. I picked it up, the pages filled with my neat, controlled handwriting, a record of a journey that had led to absolute failure. I turned it over to the blank side. I uncapped my pen. My hand was steady. At the top of the clean page, I wrote a new title, Event Plan, The Escape. My old identity, the one that found comfort in color-coded binders and timed schedules, was gone, burned away by failure. My core skill remained. I started to draw, my pen scratching out a rough schematic of the resort from what I remembered of the arrival. I sketched the main building, the manicured lawns, the high outer wall. I circled the grand ballroom, the heart of Julian's perfect order. Next to it, I drew a large question mark. Every good plan starts with a problem to be solved, and the problem was how to get out. First, I had to get out of this room. I broke open the base of a heavy floor lamp and stripped the wire from its cord with my teeth. The electronic lock on the door had a small keypad, and with the wire, I shorted the circuits behind the panel. The lock clicked open with a soft electronic sigh. I slipped into the hallway, a pristine corridor that smelled faintly of lemon polish. I moved through the silent building, my worn clothes and dirty boots, a clear violation of the sterile environment. I found what I was looking for on the administrative level, an office with a brass plaque that read, Venue Logistics. Inside, I found the resort's entire operational playbook laid out in binders on a shelf, a sight so familiar it was almost comforting. I pulled down the master event schedule and the security patrol manifest. My eyes scanned the columns and grids, and I saw it almost immediately, a glaring flaw in their design. A 15-minute window, between 3:15 and 3:30, where a shift change left the network of service tunnels beneath the ballroom completely unpatrolled. I needed to tell Chloe. I found the floral prep room, where the arrangements for the ceremony were being assembled. The air was thick with the scent of lilies. I found the specific type I had ordered for her original wedding, a rare white orchid she had obsessed over for weeks. I wrote a quick note on a scrap of paper and tucked it deep inside the petals of a single bloom. Then I inserted that flower into the center of the bridal bouquet. The note was simple. When the vows begin, give them a Crimson River diversion. She would understand. From a dark storage closet across the hall, I watched a guard in a clean black uniform pick up the bouquet and carry it away. I followed him at a distance and saw him deliver it to the room where they were holding Chloe. A few minutes later, I saw her through the open doorway as they let her out. She was holding the flowers. Her eyes swept the hallway, and for a second they met my hiding spot. She gave a nod so small it was almost imperceptible. The event was live. I was in the dark concrete service corridors when the plan failed. I had made it to the main artery that ran beneath the ballroom, but my way was blocked. A recent rock slide had collapsed part of the tunnel, leaving a wall of earth and stone where a doorway should have been. I was trapped between the cave-in and the approaching sound of footsteps. I heard the clipped radio chatter of the apostles. They knew I was out. I turned and ran, leaving my perfect plan buried under tons of rock. I had to improvise. I used my knowledge of how these places worked, the hidden systems that kept the luxury running. I found a junction for the fire suppression system and twisted a valve, sending a spray of foul-smelling retardant into a side corridor and forcing the guards to reroute. In the massive laundry room, I opened the release on a high-pressure steam line, filling the area with a blinding white cloud. I scrambled up onto a sorting table and squeezed into a dumbwaiter, using it to get to the lobby level above. I was moving without a schedule, reacting instead of planning. As I climbed out of the dumbwaiter into an empty hallway, a soft alarm began to sound. A series of small red lights started flashing on a security panel on the wall above me, mapping the building's corridors. One light was blinking faster than the others, showing my exact location. They knew where I was. In the ballroom, Chloe saw the apostles running past the main doors, their expressions urgent. She must have known my part of the plan had gone wrong. She had to act alone, and she had to act now. As Julian took her hand, preparing to place it on the biometric scanner that would finalize their union, she did the only thing she could. She grabbed a massive, ornate candelabra from a nearby table and shoved it into the heavy velvet stage curtains. They went up in an instant, flames climbing toward the high ceiling. Then she unleashed her true talent. She started screaming, a raw, piercing sound that cut through the followers' shocked silence. "You ruined my perfect day. It's all ruined." Her tantrum was a work of art. It sowed chaos and confusion, a perfect human diversion. The fire triggered the compound's real alarm, a deafening klaxon that I could hear from the hallway. It was a catastrophic sound, a dinner bell broadcasting their location for miles into the silent, hungry world. Julian's face, which had been a mask of serene control, twisted into pure rage. He ignored the fire. He ignored the panicking crowd. He turned to Chloe, his hand dropping to the pistol holstered on his hip. "You," he snarled, his voice a low growl of fury, "have just made a fatal error." I burst out of the service hallway and into the main lobby just as Chloe fled the ballroom, the fire roaring behind her. We were cornered. Julian and the last of his elite apostles blocked the main entrance, their weapons raised. Beyond them, through the large glass doors, I could hear it, the rising screech of the horde. As Julian raised his pistol to point it at Chloe, I didn't try to fight him. I just gestured with my hand toward the chaos erupting all around us, the followers stampeding past us, the flames consuming his perfect ceremony. "Look at your perfect order, Julian." My voice was calm. For a fatal second, his eyes left us. He looked at the collapse of his kingdom, his face a canvas of disbelief, as his entire system dissolved into screams and fire. Chloe seized the moment. She lifted a heavy crystal vase from a pedestal and smashed it over his head. He crumpled to the ground, stunned. We ran. We burst through the main gates, now completely unguarded, just as the first of the shriekers scrambled over the walls. From the lawn, we heard Julian's final scream as he was sworn. It was a short, sharp sound, quickly drowned out by the screeching of 1,000 more creatures pouring into his perfect, burning sanctuary. From a nearby hill, we watched Eden's Gate be consumed. The flames lit up the night, and the sound was a constant, inhuman roar. I was still holding the notebook, the one with event plan, the escape, written on the first page. I looked at it for a moment, then I let it fall from my hand into the dirt. I looked at Chloe. She was no longer a client, no longer a package to be delivered. We were equals, survivors. we turned our backs on the burning compound and walked together down the empty road into an uncertain dawn. We had no destination, no map, and finally, no plan. The sun began to rise, illuminating the endless road ahead. For the first time, the uncertainty felt less like a threat and more like a promise.